Welcome back. In our last lesson, we started learning about JavaScript classes. And in this lesson, we're going to go ahead and continue from where we left off. So if you can go ahead and go into your project folder, if you go ahead and go into the 36-classes2 folder and the start subfolder, go ahead and open up main.js. And then in your browser, if you can go ahead and open up index.html, you should see classes part 2 on the web page. So in our last video, we learned how we can create our own custom class, and we learned about how we could add our own methods and properties to this class. So one thing I wanted to cover is our constructor. So the constructor is a very special method on our class. As we've seen, when we create a new instance of our custom object, those arguments that we pass will be used as parameters in our constructor. So this is how we can initialize certain values on our class. However, if you do not provide a constructor when you create your class, JavaScript will automatically add an invisible one and it will be empty. So if we omit this, we should still be able to create our class. However, all of our properties that we initialize will no longer exist and our class will still be able to function. So in addition to the constructor, there is another type of method that's special, and these are static methods. So static methods can be added to a class itself, and they can be invoked by using the class name. However, one thing to note is these methods are not on our object prototype. And what I mean by that is, right now, we have a method called fullName. And when we create a new object that is of type userProfile, we can invoke fullName by doing user.fullName. A static method, on the other hand, is a method we can only invoke by using our userProfile class name. So if I do static and then the method name test, I'm going to go ahead and do console.log hello. So now if I save and come down here, if I go ahead and try doing user.test and we save and refresh, and we should get an error because test is not one of the methods that's available on my class here. It is a static method. So to actually use test, I need to use userProfile.test. So now you'll see when I invoke it this way, you'll see I'm able to invoke that method. Another important thing to note is about the context of this inside these static methods. So if I go ahead and do console.log this, we go ahead and take a look at the scope. So you'll see the context of this in this static method is referring to my full class itself. It's not actually referring to my object. So this is important to know because if you need to refer to the object that was created, then you'll need to pass it in as a parameter. So we'll go ahead and comment that out. So the next thing I want to talk about is properties on our object. So we can see when we're logging our object that our object currently has two properties, first name and last name. However, we haven't talked about how we can access these properties outside of our class. We've seen how we can refer to them inside our class, but we've not done anything with them outside. So our properties are just like properties on another object, and we can access them by using the dot notation. So I can do user. So I can go ahead and do console.log user.firstname. And if I go ahead and save and refresh, you'll see that Joe gets outputted to my console. So in addition to reading these properties, we can also modify them. So I can do user.lastname equals test. And now if I console log my user.lastname, we'll see that our object has been updated to have test as my last name. So one of the things that's really unique about JavaScript is there is no private properties on our class here. So we've seen how we can reference our properties directly and read values, and how we can overwrite those values by referencing that property name directly. So normally, in other programming languages, we would have our properties be private, and then we'd have a getter and setter for getting those values and setting those values, and those would be public methods that someone could utilize. JavaScript also has the concept of getters and setters, and we can use those to And we can also use those to do something special with a value before we return them or when we set them. So to see an example, I'm going to go ahead and create a property called full name. So I'm just going to go ahead and comment this out really quick. And then to actually use our getters and setters, we have to use the get and set keywords. So I'm going to do get, and I'm going to go ahead and do full name. And then this will be a method. And then here, I'm just going to go ahead and place this line of code here. And then to set full name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do set full name. And then we'll receive name as an argument, so we'll have a name parameter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do const temp name will equal name dot split. And I'm going to go ahead and split on a space. And then I'm going to go ahead and console log that so we can take a look at it. So then down here, let's go ahead and comment out our full name method call, since that will no longer work. And instead, we're going to go ahead and do console.log.user log and then user.fullname. So one thing to know about getters and setters is even though these look like methods, when we want to reference this property, we do not use those parentheses. We just reference them as a regular property. So if I go ahead and save and refresh, you'll see that our full name returns Joe test. So then what I'm going to try doing is I'm going to do user.fullname equals test2. And so now we'll go ahead and save and refresh. And you'll see I have Joe test. Yes, so up in our code we said this.fullname. What we actually want to log is our temp name. So if we go ahead and save and refresh, you'll see now temp name is an array of 2 items. So what we can do is we can do this.firstName equals temp name, the first element in our array. This.lastName equals temp name, and then we'll do our second element in our array. And then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get rid of our console log, and then we'll just go ahead and log our full name after we set it. So go ahead and save and refresh. You'll see our name's Joe Test, and then with our new method for full name, we'll go ahead and set it to test2.